there's not going to be a lot up here. It's just going to be some visual aids for you, because I'm more of engaging and talking and telling you about where I'm coming from with this. So I thought what I would do is take a couple of minutes to tell you a little bit about myself and how I got involved and why I feel so strongly about that connection between fashion and business. My undergraduate degree is in design. You know, I did graduate work in textile design, but my MBA is in finance and business. And throughout my career, I've always looked for choices in my career that were business opportunities. Like I also have a consulting company, but how can I merge those two things together? You know, my love of design and textile and fashion and business. And so throughout my work career, I was always in positions where I was mentoring salespeople, where I was involved with architects and designers. I always managed to do that. And then a few years ago, I had the opportunity to come to CCM and teach the 2 fashion merchandising sections. And in addition to that, last year, I also teach at Montclair State in the fashion studies program. So that's also fashion and business. But what's always been really important to me in talking about this topic is, you know, the design students here, we have a great program, and in most of the courses, they're doing a lot of, you know, 3D projects, you know, things that are very visual. When they come into the fashion merchandising department, you know, classes with me, what I tell them up front is, this is how we're going to approach it. You know, we're going to do projects, but we're going to take it to that next step. I want you to do a project, and then I also want you to know, how are you going to take that into the business world? How are you going to present it? So it's not going to end at you doing the project successfully. It's going to continue on to some of my connections in the fashion industry and in the business industry, you know, and like Professor Allen, who are going to sit down and be part of a panel and say, okay, you know, you're presenting to me as if I'm a client. So what I ask of my students when they come in is understand that they're going to really be in 3 roles. They're going to be coming in as students. They're going to be coming in through the eyes of a designer, but they're also going to be coming in through the eyes of a business person, whether it's the manufacturer, the retailer, whatever it is. And the other thing that I do to enhance that is I always make sure that we have guest panels coming in on projects. And those guest panels usually include Professor Allen. Shelley joins in. I bring in a couple of my students who've graduated, and then I bring in a couple of my contacts that are out in the fashion world. Because I want them to approach all their projects understanding, you know, a couple of things that I say in the philosophy is, look at it this way, as if you're a business owner like I am, and you're going out and you're making a presentation on whatever project or task that I've given you. Understand that when you go out and you present it, the most important thing to understand is you're not going to be fortunate to have a room full of design people. You know, when you go out there, you're going to be meeting with the finance people, the marketing people, and those people are all they're concerned about are dollars. And you also have to get to them visually what you've been trying to, you know, put together in either a mock-up or a 3D presentation. So I said to them, so you have to go out with those eyes and understand how to translate what you have done in all your courses, and even in my intro course, and go out and present it to a panel like myself, who's going to say, I don't see that, or I don't understand that, or what are the dollars, what are the cents to that? So I said to them, those are the eyes that you have to use when you go out there. And I said, and the other thing that I want you to always remember, I say to my students, is, you know, you're graded on, obviously, the success of your project. I said, but I also want you to understand that I will come back to you at times, or often, and say, you didn't quite, that isn't a good fit for what we want to do necessarily. So the other important thing that I convey to them is, we're going to be going back more than once and doing it. Now, because a lot of times the students, it's interesting, you know, coming from a student perspective, they'll say to me, well, you know, I do a project, I'm going to be graded. I said, yes, you are. But if you're fortunate enough to go out into the business world, like I've done in the years, and make a presentation to a client, and for the client to look at you and say, you know what, you nailed it, you're hired. I said, if that happens, you're really fortunate. But that's not what happens. What they say is, I like where you're going with this. Now, change this, this, and this. And so I say to my students, that's exactly how we handle this course. You know, I expect you to come in with your best idea, and we sit down as a, you know, as a panel of students, and we critique. And again, when I have the students do that, I have them do it as if they are the business person or the retailer or the store. And I'm going to talk about one of my projects with Lord & Taylor to give you more of an understanding of this. So we critique them, and it gives them an opportunity to say, all right, this is the way we want you to go, this is what we want you to change. And then they're responsible to come back and do that. And one of the things I found initially when I started was, you know, getting the students to feel comfortable with that. because they're very comfortable with going in and saying, I'm taking an exam, I'm getting a grade. I'm doing a project, I'm getting a grade. I said, that's not what they're going to experience when you go out there, especially not in our field. You know, you're just fortunate if they say, we like what you're working on, we're going to hire you. Now, this is how I want you to change it. You know, so those are some of the, those are expectations that are important for me to set, because the tone of the class is much more business focused. Even though, they're using all that creativity, but now they're saying, okay, how do we go out and what do we do? And one of the first things that I do in all my courses, and that's even when I've taught some business or marketing courses, I start with branding. But the way that I approach it in the merchandising department is a little bit different, because we talk about branding, and it's really funny that first day when I have the students come into the class and ask them a few questions, we start getting into conversation, and then I'll say to them, what's your brand? What makes you memorable? What are some things about you that I'm going to remember? What are people around you going to say? And a lot of them have no idea. And I ask them things like, what's your favorite food store? Things like that, because I want to see how much do they pay attention to their surroundings, And if you like that food store, is it because that's how they merchandise their food, So that first day, for those first few hours, they're all sitting there looking at me like they have no idea, because they have to stop and really think about that. Because I say to them, you know what, if you want to go out and you want to be a merchandiser, a marketer, or be in that field, the only way to be really comfortable doing that, and really it applies in my mind to anything that we're teaching, is if you don't really understand your own brand and yourself as the initial product, you're really not going to be able to go out and sell or market or merchandise, whether you're in the fashion industry or whatever industry you're in. So I like to use that, and I get them involved in branding to the point where I'm going to show you a couple of examples. I have them do a project called the shopping bag project. They have to design a shopping bag, but the interesting twist on this is it's a shopping bag that's them, the student, as the product. And they have to come up with something that when we look at it, like how we critique it is they design this bag. And actually, let me show you. Let me close the light for a minute, because I think it's this switch here. I will show you a couple of examples, because that to me is the first step before we go forward, is for them to get a really strong sense of who they are and how they convey themselves to the public. So here's some examples. Now these are shopping bags, these are their ideas. They made them from scratch. We took a class period to do this. This is a leather bag that a student did. Most of these have been on display in the department. This was a velvet bag. This was interesting because she designed it from scratch. Some of them used bags, as the core. She actually put all the components together on this one. She painted this. The picture didn't do it justice. All right, let me go back. So as we look at some of these, and the students had to do this project, after they complete it, they take a class section to complete. I'm going to put the light back on because I wanted to give you some sense of what I was talking about. We sit down as a panel, the students, and we critique. And what I say to my class is, here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at this product. I mean, obviously they know who the student is. The student comes up with the bag, but they don't say anything about it. This is me, this is my bag. And I say to my class, all right, this is what I want you to do. I want you to look at what they did, and I want you to tell me all about that person. What do you get from that? What's their sense of style? Are they confident? Are they shy? Are they strong? Whatever you can. And the interesting thing about this is I would say 9 times out of 10, the students nail it. And that's the fun part of it. You watch the student whose bag it is, and they're going, wow. They're either saying, you're right, or they're saying, I didn't realize that about myself. It's a really great exercise. And I say to them, and then again, I have a lot of students who come back to me at the end and say, I hate my bag, I'm doing it again. Great, do it again. Because what came out of this, and then I always in my projects throw the same thing in about me. I'll say to them initially, you've had a sense this whole class to look at me and talk to me. Tell me about me, what's my brand? Because I say to them, in what we're going to be doing, you're going to be going out to the public. You have to be really comfortable with how you're coming across, and is that what you want your brand to be? So that's one of the places that we start. And it does give them a sense, and they will go back and they will, some of them make changes and come back with other products. The other thing about this, excuse me, is as I'm doing all these different projects, one of the things I say to the students, along with this, by the way, they also do business cards. Because I say to them, I want you to think about this as the starting point. I say to the students, you may be think of yourself as a student, but don't think of yourself that way. Because the truth is your career has already started. You're here and you're building it. So the projects that we work on, also, I try to get them to key in on some of the things they really like, particularly about fashion or about merchandising. So branding is one of the first places we start. The next thing that we do is, let me talk about the panels for a second before I go into the project that I want to talk about, which is a project where we actually work with Lord & Taylor. I have a friend who's general manager of Lord & Taylor in Willowbrook, and as Professor Allen knows, he comes in at least once or twice a semester to sit on the panel.
I learn a great deal.
And he's great. And they love him because he has the greatest socks. He comes in with stripes, polka dots. He comes in very conservative suits, but he's got that splash of color. That's his brand. But anyway, getting back to this, the idea of having a panel or a guest speaker. I have colleagues like that who are in the industry. I have a friend who's a celebrity stylist. You've met Gina, who comes in and sits in. So I always try to make sure that there's a component on the panel of those particular retailers or people in the industry that can take a look at it and say, yeah, I would go with this or I wouldn't. Then, of course, I bring in, like I said, Professor Allen, usually someone else from faculty to sit in, and Shelley joins us. Shelley brings a very, Professor Allen brings, a different perspective. Shelley joins us, and the perspective she's been bringing in, which I didn't even think about initially, was that consumer, that other piece. What does the consumer think? Because I remember that we did a project at one time, and they had to do a 3D model of something. And I remember her saying, I'm looking at this through my eyes as a mother with my two daughters. How would I react to this particular thing that way? And I said, well, that's really great. And then last year, I decided to add some of my fashion merchandising students who've either graduated or definitely completed the 2 courses. And something interesting came out of that. I expected that the students would appreciate the fact that here were some people on the panel who had already gone through this, and that was what they would see. What I didn't anticipate, which was another great thing, were the students who've come in now, so we've done this three times already, will come to me afterwards and say, wow, I had no idea what it was like on the other side. To be sitting there on the panel and having to sit down and look at the criteria and having to figure it out and judge it. Again, I said, that's what's going to be like when you're out in the real world. So that's how we put the panel together. So one of the projects that I wanted to talk about was a project that we do that I call the Lord & Taylor Project. Well, actually, before I do that, let me talk a little bit about a window display project we do. That is one of the ways I get them out into the public, because now they have some sense of who they are. They're understanding their brand. So one of the initial projects I give them is to go out and to research window displays, but they're required to go into the stores or into the retailers and talk to the managers and talk to the staff and really understand, because they have to design and build a 3D model of a window. So they have to come back as part of the project and say, where did they go? Who did they speak to? That's why I say to them, it's going to be really important how you present themselves. And they say, well, how do I go out and start? I said, you go out there very honestly and say, I'm a student. This is my project. This is what I love. This is what I'm passionate about. And I could really use your help in saying, telling me something about, or who can I talk to who does visual? I said to them, if you have to reach out to the corporate office, you need to get used to doing that. Because one of the other things that I try to convey to them is the importance of research. I don't know how you find it in other departments, but I have some students who love it, and I have some students that really have no clue, that come to me and say, how do I look this up? Where do I start when I give them a topic? They're sitting there trying to type in a website and not knowing how to search. And that's another thing that we spend quite a bit of time doing on all the projects, is the importance of them knowing how to do the research. There's no shortcuts. You know, I said, I can guide you, I can give you a phrase, but you need to do that. Because if you're going to go forward, I said to him, remember, what's driving this is business. And you need to have that information, you know, and know how to get that information. So in doing this project, they have to do that research. I said to them, before you walk into that retailer, you better do some homework and know about it and know their brand and know what they're looking for and whether or not their windows are successful. And then they actually do 3D window displays. And what we try and do is also get back to that retailer, because we want that feedback. You know, I want my students to know, would they have accepted that design or not accepted it? We also do 3D versions of what we call pop-up stores. It's the same kind of concept. This first project is just the outside window display. In the pop-up store, it's the same kind of research. They have to go out, they have to pick a particular retailer, they have to research it, they have to go in and talk, they have to document who they're talking to, so that I see that they're having that exchange and that conversation. So when they come back, the purpose of the pop-up store, I don't know if you've probably seen it, when you go into stores like Target from time, or some other stores. Target's a great example because they do an amazing amount of marketing. From time to time, you'll go into Target and you'll see displays where they'll say, I have this particular designer is here for a short period of time, and we'll have a small area. Well, that's very simplified. You can go into higher end stores and that's amplified into a much bigger space. You know, it's almost like being transported somewhere. You know, and that's sort of what I say to them. So in doing the pop-up store, it's the same concept. They have to be able to create this design and present it to a panel and be able to be really comfortable in defending why they think that's going to be successful, why they think that's going to drive sales, why it's going to bring customers in, why it fits with the image of the company. You know, this is all part of, you know, that's why I say, you know, they come in, they have to understand that being creative is wonderful, but then what do you do with it? You know, I've often said to them on some of the panels, the most creative team doesn't always get the job. You know, and they looked at me when I first said that, and they said, what are you talking about? I said, understand something again. When you go in and you're in front of a conference room, you're at a boardroom, and you're sitting there, and you have marketing, finance, production, all these different departments there, you have to sell it that they understand what the complete package is. And if you have this fantastic idea, but you don't know how to execute it or explain it, you're not going to get it. Because I remember the first time we did a panel a couple of years ago, and the best design didn't win. And they were a little bit surprised until we said to them, well, that's because your team wasn't organized. Are we going to hire you? Are we going to feel comfortable saying, yeah, they worked together well, they put an idea well, they executed it well? You know, I said, that's what you have to think about. That's the next step. You're taking it out of the classroom. What's going to happen when you're out there in the real world? I wanted to share a story with you. One of my students last year did a pop-up store. And they, that particular project, I wanted them to create an environment for a designer somewhere in the world that they researched that really wasn't visible here in the United States, that wasn't that well known, that maybe was just well known elsewhere. This particular student chose a designer in Paris who was an up-and-coming designer, you know, had to do all their research on it, and she created this real, I'm sorry I didn't have a picture, I looked and I couldn't find it, but the really point of the story is she creates this amazing pop-up design. And I said to her, you need to share this. This is something the designer should see. I mean, that's how good that is. That's why I say to my students, I want you to do these projects and feel so comfortable that you could walk out to that client right now with that project. So she Instagrammed a picture of it. I don't know if I told you the story. Uh-huh. She Instagrammed a picture of it to the designer in Paris. And because she said to me, what do I say? I said, the truth. You're a college student. This is your major. You're passionate about it. You did this project. You love what he's doing. You would love his feedback. And he responded to her. I'll never forget. She came running in. She was jumping up into, this is Jessica who did the bag. She came running into me. She was so excited. She said, he responded to me that he really liked what I did. And, you know, if I'm ever in Paris, I said, don't laugh. You may be in Paris one day. I said, but that's the connection. You know, that's what I say to my students. Take something that you like or that you've done, and don't feel shy about reaching out. Because the truth is, the person that gets the job is the person that's proactive. The person that reaches out and says, hey, I did this. I'm a student, but this is what I did. And it was great. You know, I think on her bucket list is she's going to Paris. I could see that one coming. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, so now you get some of the basics of how I try and prepare the students. going to take another sip of water from talking. Actually, before I do that, let me talk a little bit about a project they do on e-commerce, because that also builds up to what we're talking about. I want her to do... Okay, let me close the light on this one. Another project they do is a project that's called branding and e-commerce. And what they have to do here is, keeping in mind who they are and what their brand is, they have to design a website. And one of the things I say to them when they're doing this is, try and pick something that you think might be a direction you want to go in the future. Because sometimes the students will come and say, you know, I want to do a side business, I'm interested in this, I'm interested in that. This particular student, Natalia, is a high school student. She's actually here for this semester. Excuse me. She was from Roxbury High, and she was on a program, as you know, you probably know Natalia Pereira, which allowed her to come in and take a couple of courses. Amazingly talented student, and she got accepted at FIT. That's where she's going next semester. But she had a love of dresses and prom. And you see up here, Style Seekers, the blog for high school fashionistas. And this is Natalia, because her prom was coming up. And she said to me, this is something I want to do, and I want to continue to do. She says, because I love this idea, I want to do a blog. You know, she's a high school student, she wants to reach out. She wants to reach out to other high school students or young people. But some of the parameters that they had to do with this project was, as you can see, they have to do a blog, which is what this page is, and constantly be updating the blog. A little bit about herself. Hello, fellow style seekers. It's Natalia Pereira here, also known as your teenage fashionista blogger. Being that I'm still a senior in high school, one of my biggest motivations to end the school year with a bang before I'm off to college is to prepare for senior prom. Many of my posts are inspired by fashionable yet reasonable prom attire. And then, of course, another component they were required to do was charity. One of the things I always have them incorporate into what they do is charity. Now, keep in mind, in putting this together, I said to them, I want you to feel comfortable enough when this is done that it's up there and people are going to come to it. And it's interesting, the feedback I get, that they're writing blogs and they are hearing from people, and students and other folks are responding to their blogs. They got that interaction going. So there's always the charity component to that. And then also, they had to have community. Because I said to them, you know, when you think about, you know, if you look at some of the mailing pieces that you probably get, like Bloomingdale's or some of the others, Bloomingdale's is really good at content. When they send out a lot of those mailing pieces that we see, you not only see fashion, but you're also seeing a lot more content. Sometimes on that back page of that mailing piece, you'll see something about what's going on in theater or what's going on in the community. And one of the things I say to the students, you know, this is happening across the board, not just in our industry, but everything is all about experiential marketing. You know, reaching out, having something memorable that's going on that people are going to remember. So in doing this blog, I said the same thing. You know, people can go online and shop or you know, go and look at product. But if you have other things on there, you're going to draw those people back. And and that's the trend that you're seeing happening everywhere. You know, even, you know, any of your retailers, you're not going to just see product on there. You're going to see events. You're going to see charity. They want to draw you back on a regular basis, not just because they're Bloomingdale's and you're going to shop there. So they had to have the charity component. Of course, they had to have an area on it where you buy and sell, you know, the contact page. And the other thing that's on there, and she may have had it under products, that was really important, was I always want them to incorporate products made in the United States. They don't all have to be made in the United States, but we take a lot of time talking about what's going on in the business world as far as that's concerned, because, you know, now Walmart last year Walmart made a commitment, I forget how many billions of dollars, to try and pull manufacturing back into the United States, you know, after years of them pushing it out of the country. So I said to them, you know, we explore a lot about products made in the USA and how to market those and how to merchandise those. So I wanted to show, I have a couple of others, but I'd rather jump into the Lord & Taylor project. first, and then we could always go back to this. So that project that we do every semester, and Professor Allen joins us most semesters, when we do it in the spring semester, it's all about Mother's Day. When we do it in the fall semester, it's all about holiday. And the store that they're working with is Michael, the general manager's store in Willowbrook, the Lord & Taylor store. And they're broken up into 2 teams that are going to compete. And here's some of the requirements that they have to do. They have to start out, initially that first day, they have to really identify a team leader, put together a team name, put together a product that they want to use that has to be a Lord & Taylor product. And they have to start laying out and understanding where their concept's going to go. Because the things they're going to be asked to do is they're going to have to take a product that's in Lord & Taylor right now that they want to re-merchandise for Mother's Day. They also have to find a network, any network show. It doesn't have to be just a Food Network, but it has to be a show connected to food. And I chose that because it was Mother's Day, and that was a good combination. So they have to understand whatever show they choose has to fit in with their theme. They also have to, included in that, use whatever the Pantone color of the year is. This year it's Marisol, which is a wine color. That has to be incorporated into the theme. So in the first day, they have to understand and choose those things and their concept and have that mapped out and ready to go, because they have about 5 weeks to do this, both in class and out of class, to compete before we go in front of this panel that I was describing to you. Now, the things that they have to do, when they choose their product, they're tasked with going out to the store, going into Lord & Taylor, asking for permission to photograph so they can see how the product's being merchandised. You know, I always say to them, ask that permission first. You know, again, if you tell them you're a student and you're doing a project, it's very rare that they ever say you can't do it. You know, I said, don't just walk in and take pictures. That's not it. Plus, you want to meet them. The more people you can meet and get their cards, again, that adds to it. So they have to go out to Lord & Taylor. They have to do that research, and they actually created a board with photographs. I said, I want you to do this before board, so that when you go in, because I said to them, the whole time you're doing this, this is the hat you're wearing. You are a company that Lord & Taylor has approached to say, I want you to create a proposal for Mother's Day. And you're competing with this other team. And I'm going to choose one of you, I hope, to do this. So I say, that has to be the hat you're wearing through this whole process. So you go out there and you do that research, and then I said to them, and then you're required to go to at least one competitor, whether it's Bloomingdale's, Macy's, whatever store you choose, and you have to do the same thing. You have to see what product they're using, how they're merchandising it, and talk to someone in the store and document what you did. You know, that's going to give you the foundation. Then you have to explore the food show, and how is that going to tie together with your theme. So that's the initial steps that they have to do. They have to create, this is where they do a 3D pop-up store that I was talking about. Let me pull something up to show you what that looks like. Well, this piece actually is one of the pieces they just did for Lord & Taylor Mother's Day. They actually printed up a piece that was a mailing piece. This was an example of it, the front and the back. Now here's something. When they came to the panel, let me close the light. Oh, thank you, thank you. So they put together this really attractive piece. You know, it's probably about this big. And they spelled the word "your" wrong. Y-O-U-R. It's an apostrophe R-E. And it was funny because spelling is one of my things. I freaked out. So I didn't see the final copy till the day of the presentation. And actually, Shelley was on the panel. And that was the first thing she said, because she's like me. She said, you didn't use the right word. And that's important. I said, you're going out making a presentation. You don't spell correctly or use the right grammar or punctuation. Am I going to feel comfortable hiring you? That you don't proof it? You know, I mean, so that was, they're never going to make that mistake again, I'm sure. But let me go back and show you, as we're talking about the pop-ups. Maybe I'll give it a few minutes and it might work. So they have to create this 3D pop-up. And the size of this pop-up is, it could be anywhere from maybe 2 feet by 2 feet high. It's really up to them. It just has to be comfortable enough that when they present it to the panel's going to clearly understand how this is going to look. And you know what? Last night, I don't know how you folks are, but sometimes like I wake up in the middle of the night and I go, okay, What is it that I also want to do, just to make sure something like this doesn't happen? I print hard copies. I come from that generation. I'm a hard copy person. So I'll pass these around to give you an idea of what the pop-ups look like. This is one for the Kate Spade.
Were these down in the case down
Yes,
here?
yes, over the years, yes.
They're so nice.
Yeah, they're amazing, and
Yeah.
they're done to
Oh,
scale.
I like that.
They're done, you know, that's a Kate Spade. Yeah, so you'll see 3 of them. So there's the pop-ups. So that's okay if we don't have the screen.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm not a handbag kind of guy, but
It's
That's-
visually appealing. Yeah, it's neat, it's orderly,
I
it's
probably walk
colorful.
around in there, you know,
Yeah.
maybe a gift for somebody, you know.
Yeah. So, you know, the message that I say to them is we have to be able to present this to a panel who probably is not visual, and they have to see themselves be able to walk into that space and saying, this is great. This is going to really help us sell the product. And equally as important, because sometimes this has happened, I said, you have to keep in mind what Lord & Taylor's brand is. You know, Lord & Taylor isn't like walking into Nordstrom or walking into Walmart. You know, you have to make sure that whatever you choose fits into Lord & Taylor. Because we've had a time in the past where a panel did, this is the one I mentioned where Shelley looked at it through the eyes of the mother. They did a pop-up, it was well done, but for Mother's Day they decided to do a bedroom scene. Now, I do my best, you know, when I'm meeting with the students every week to try and say, well, I don't know, maybe we should change that or twix it. But at the end of the day, I have to leave it finally to them. You know, I can say to them, I'm not quite sure. They decided they were going to go with it. I don't know if you remember that one. And Shelley's response immediately was, I'm not comfortable going with my young daughters to Lord & Taylor, and this display that I'm walking into is going to be a bedroom. That was just how that affected her. And I said to my students, see how important all of that is? Because you have a cross-section of people coming in. You know, what's comfortable in Lord & Taylor? It's not an edgy store. You know, they're trying to be. They're positioning themselves a lot more aggressively. They're positioning themselves going after a younger demographic now, but still, you have to make sure that these are going to fit. So they have to do these pop-ups and be ready to do the presentations. Along with that, the mailing piece that I had shown you with the incorrect, unfortunately, you know, like I said, they learned their lesson. And the other thing that they have to do tying into this concept is, I don't know if you notice when you walk through department stores, sometimes you'll be walking through the aisle and you'll just see a freestanding display. They had to create one of those that tied into this. So as we walk through the store, they could be positioned any way they want. They have to tie it all together. They have to be in professional attire. They have to meet as a team and be comfortable now to present. As a matter of fact, we just had a presentation last week on one of the panels. So Michael comes in. We have, you know, Professor Allen, myself, Shelley, you know, my students, and I usually have maybe Gina, who's a celebrity stylist, and we're going to sit there, and they have to know when they come in, because I said to them, understand how we're going to come back at you. We're going to question you. We're not just looking at you and saying, oh, that looks good, that's really pretty. We're going to come back and say, this doesn't fit, this isn't our brand, this is going to cost too much, how are we going to move it, how are we going to transport this? You know, all those different things. I said, and you have to feel really strong and comfortable that you can defend your position. I said, now that's the last piece of this. Comfortable enough in what you did, that you tied it together, that you feel that you can defend your position to us as we come back with all these questions. And Michael being there from Lord & Taylor, you know, brings, and he is, and he brings that amazing perspective because he can say, yes, no, this works, this doesn't. And a thing that's come out of this over the last couple of years, because, you know, Michael now comes twice a semester, not just once a semester. But he will email me and say, this is like my favorite thing to do outside of Lord & Taylor, to come here with the students. But here's a wonderful example of what happens when, you know, you bring in this and you make those connections. Michael has seen some of the websites that they've done, and I've showed you there's some others where the blogging component is very important, you know, having that every day and adding that. So I didn't even have a chance to tell you. He contacted me in the last week or two, and he said, we want to try something different at his store in Willowbrook. Now, as I say, Lord & Taylor's position is we need to change our demographic. Not just, you know, because even my students say, oh, Lord & Taylor, my mother shops there. And I look at them and I say, you know, I'm not ancient, right? I'm probably the age of their mother. I said, you know, be kind in what you say. But he'll say to the students, we want to get more of you guys in. And what's nice when he comes in and he presents and he talks about some of the brands, some of my students for the first time have walked into a Lord & Taylor and come back to me and say, wow, you know, we really could shop in there. But getting back to my point, he contacted me about a week or two ago and he said, we want to try something a little different. He said, you know, I've met a lot of your students over the last couple of years. I want somebody who's doing blogging and doing it well to come into Lord & Taylor and engage some of our customers and write on it on their blog. And so I turned around, I looked at it, I had a couple of students, I immediately put the students in contact with him. He was very excited. I sent links to the blog to him, and I said, take a look. I think these are a couple of students that you know and you might feel comfortable. He said, I love them. He said in the next week or two, he was going to reach out to these students. And that's what I say to them as they do these projects. As you do it, keep in mind, it's not a project that you did in college that stays here. It's a project that you want to feel comfortable walking out the door and saying to someone like Michael, what do you think of this? Do you think this is going to work in your store? What do you think of my blog? What do you think of my website? What do you think of all these things? And a number of the students too, start little side businesses, usually making clothes or doing things. This is the kind of thing that they have. They have their website already up. They understand e-commerce. They're ready. They've done a business card that they can be proud of and take out with them. So it's almost 11 o'clock. I want to leave some times for Q&A. So I know I do that. I can talk and digress and whatever. So that sort of gives you an idea of how I approach this with my students. So let me throw it open if you have any questions.
I'd like to make a comment. Obviously, I work with Professor Santangelo, and I've been going to these panels, and I will say Michael is very generous with his time and very good at the analysis from a truly business perspective. He's doing that every day in the store, and it gives a lot of credibility to the critique. Just a couple observations. So one is that it is important for the merchandisers to understand that they're not pure designers. And even more broadly in the design area, it's very rare that you get to just go, well, this is what it is, and you have to accept it 100%. That's not really what happens with the business. So you might think you have to get everything in the world. It's going to be modified by reality, So that's a very healthy thing for the students. Similarly, they're very young in this idea that you can take this out into the real world now and start practicing those skills. It's not just an academic exercise to present. It's very important, that rehearsal. But I said this to my own fine arts students. It's like, you don't need a degree to be an artist. You just, painters paint your painting, go out there and sell them. You can do that today, and it's very validating when they have that experience. I think coming in here at, let's say, 18 and having 2 years in the academic program, which is valuable, trying to connect that, we can use the phrase learning in life, which I find very abstract, but once they sell something, even for a very modest amount, right, it becomes real to them. And that's a huge thing. And in a short program like we have, the 2-year period, I think it's very, you to be commended for pressing that point so early. You don't wait till you graduate from grad school to start showing or something, you know what I mean? And it's even more important in a business environment. So making these contacts, making something like a pitch to somebody is real life stuff. They can say yes or no or whatever, or thank you very much, but you're out there interacting with a real public, and it's not just you're sort of pantomiming here. Okay?
The connection that I made with what you were talking about was to try and bring that over to what I do in radiography. And when you were talking about branding and whatnot, I compared that to when I'm teaching the students how to pull together their resume and seek a job as an RT, as a radiography, as a radiologic technologist. They might have the skill and graduate with this skill, like an artist has that skill, but when they go out and try and get a job or a position with this skill, they need to match what the employer is looking for. And sometimes that might not be what they want to do, like that vision that the artist has for their project, But they have to be that flexible. They have
Yeah.
to meet the needs of that person who's going to hire them.
Right.
And there's a lot of parallels with what you're saying about branding. They need to look at themselves and know who they are as a person before they can step out into that world and interview as a radiographer, and interview as a graphic designer. They need to know who they are and what they have to offer, but they also need to have that backbone or spine, if you will,
Yeah.
that if they're rejected, that's not meaning anything to do with their skill or anything to
Right.
do with them personally. It's the vision didn't meet what the consumer wanted. You know, you just
Yeah.
didn't mesh up. And there's a lot of parallels here that I was drawing with regards to knowing yourself and going out and marketing yourself and knowing
Yeah.
what the people want. And it's, you just depicted it in a more visual sense, and I've been depicting it in more,
Yeah.
you know, written and communication kind of sense.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, because what I say to the students, and this has happened to me, I've said to them, there have been times I walk into an architectural firm or a design firm, I don't feel comfortable. I said, I really do believe in that. You know, every business has if you want to say a soul, there's a culture that goes on there. I said, you know, and what I share with my students is it took me a very long time in my own career to understand that I had to interview the people, as well as them interviewing me, I had to interview the company.
Absolutely.
That had to be the right fit. But, you know, I said to them, they're at a better advantage than we are, because for us, or I want to speak for myself, maybe my generation, it was about getting that job or getting that better job and not stopping to think, you know what, that's not a good fit for me, you know, and you work really hard and you struggle and you're stressed. And I said to them, so understand there has to be that two-way dialogue. And as long as you understand yourself, you're absolutely right. And I wanted to show you this as an example. When we were talking about, you know, doing that charity component, one of the teams chose to go to Habitat for Humanity, and they did. They chose, the name of the company was Brown Pacelli. This is Gianna Pacelli and Lindsay Brown who did this. But they went out and they met with them and they put together this little bracelet, and they put together this that said, thank you for choosing to spread love to the world. The profit that is earned from these Habitat bracelets that we've donated directly to Habitat for Humanity as we all join together to make the world a better place. Once again, we thank you. Keep on loving, Lindsay and Gianna Brown Pacelli. And I'll pass this around. But they went in and they met with them and they liked it, you know. And I said to them, you know, it's a starting point.
I'm going to actually pick up on what you talk about with this external experience,
Yes.
whether through blogs or through the charities.
Thank you for coming.
There's a report that gets put out. It's called the Horizon Report, and it's done in K-12 and higher ed. And most of the time I focus on technology, but one of the trends that they're predicting for the next, I believe, like 3 years or so, is really having the students go beyond the learning institution and learn from external sources. And a lot of times, you know, that can be very easily done through social media, you know, just having that social media component to it. There are a number of teachers who's using Twitter for that, you know, connecting with various Twitter users who are within your associations. It could be people within your field, you know, leaders, researchers, and whatever. So then they start having that contact. And very often, Twitter will actually have, I guess they call users groups communities, where they will just meet. They say, okay, every Tuesday night we'll all meet at 7, and then you have this whole group of community that just come in and they would ask questions and things like that. The principal at my children's school actually uses that, and they would get principals from all over the country to discuss various, you know, policies and things like that, where that's just going on. So it's really nice to have that component, because I think so much of being in community colleges are, especially a lot of your disciplines, are very practical, you know, and getting the students out there and getting to know, okay, well, who are the sources that I should be looking at? What is the research I should be looking at? What are the companies that, you know, they may be following, especially if they're doing the marketing and the different things, you know, what should they be looking at? So it's just, but that's one thing that has come up quite recently, and they said that is probably going to be, you know, they predict it to be a trend for the next, you know, within the next 3 years or so.
Yeah. And the other thing I didn't mention with the Lord and Tail project, there are semesters that we go off-site. Michael will host us there, which is great, because I like to have them in that environment and know what that's going to be like to walk in there. And I remember one semester a student walked in about an hour and a half late, and I barely let her in the room, you know, because I said, forget it, you can't come in and interrupt. You need to understand this, you know. So when we go off-site, it gives them that added pressure, or I don't use the word pressure, but yeah, pressure. We all have pressure. They had a pressure of knowing you have to go in there because now you're there, you're physically there, in their boardroom, and you see what that feels like, and understand how to present, and how you dress, and how you appear, and all of that. You
That's
know?
a great experience.
Yeah, yeah. Try and do that as much as possible. We do that with Dress for Success because I do a lot of volunteer work, and they have a dress shop in Madison. They're in the community building, community house there. Last semester, I had my FM1 students go in, and we re-merchandised the dress shop. Remember that? Yeah. Which was such a great experience for them, and it helped the dress shop so much because it's pretty vanilla. It's just racks, and they went in and they were dusting and moving furniture and putting things together and putting mannequins up and stuff, and they did a great job, you know. The other thing I say to them is all of this should be in your LinkedIn page. You know, we talk about LinkedIn, not Facebook. We talk about Facebook and how to use it and not use it. It should be on your LinkedIn page. It should be in your portfolio. You know, they're used to with their portfolios here again, visual. You know, they painted this, they created this. No, no, no. Along with that, put this in there. You know, look at what you did for Lauren Taylor. You know, I said to them, don't think that just because you didn't get paid for it, that's not valid, that you shouldn't put it in there, you know? Or if you're doing something, I had this one student, Brian, I brought his business card, because we were actually working on his resume, and we did something very different. I actually went to Rosemary in career counseling with this idea, and I said, because they're the ones that really, you know, they know the format. And I said, this is what I want Brian to do. He was a headliner last year in the fashion show, and he did gowns. But, I mean, he wants to do couture gowns. They were amazing last year. So he wanted to do his resume, and I said to him, okay, we got to do something to make you stand out. So I went to Rosemary, and I said, this is what I'm presenting to him. What do you think? And he took a couple of pictures, like one of those, and they went down the side of the resume, and then he had his content, but he had those photos. Because I say to my students, we have to think about something. We're creative. This is what we do. You know, I said, you know, I can help you with that and with content. I said, but you need to go to career counseling because they're going to do the words. They're going to be better at the verbiage. But we got to put it together. So he got a job in the fashion industry a couple of months ago. He was on my panel last semester. He couldn't make it this semester. And so I saw him afterwards and I said, I'm just curious. What was their response to your business card and your resume? He said, that's what got their attention. You know, he was outstanding. He may have gotten it anyway, but he said they saw that and they said to him, we never saw anything like this. You know, I said that to my students. You know, add that personal thing, and even in any industry, you know, something like that connects to you. Not necessarily a picture of yourself, because I'm a private person. I don't even like have my picture on, you know, LinkedIn. You know, so I say, but you know, add that little thing because that's the industry that we're in. One of the things I did is. I'm glad I did this. These are some of the websites. I put my contact information because you can always feel free to reach out. I put some of the topics that we use in the class, but I also put the 3 websites. Natalia Pereira was the one you looked at, but the other 2 are really great. And I'm sorry this locked up because I would love to have shown it to you. But I just thought, you know, in case you ever need to reach me, here's my cell phone, and oh, thank you. There's some of the things that we talk about in the class. As you can see, some of the topics, you know, multicultural merchandising, multi-channel shopping, mass customization, because all of that talks about what's going on in technology and what's changing in the business climate and how it's impacting what we do in merchandising and marketing.
Very nice. Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you so much. It was very informative.
Yeah, I'm
Really
glad.
interesting.
Oh, thank you so
It's just like a whole different world for us, you know, like, you know, when you're in medical, it's all you think about. It's just so nice to think about other things that are going on in the world and other students. I think I had a friend, one of my daughter's friends was graduated with this degree, and she is working in Macy's as a marketer. So she's happy. You know, she's doing what she likes, making out beautiful clothes and traveling all over. So she likes it a lot.
Yeah.
And she just graduated from here, and she really didn't go on. She did really well.
That's great. But you made a good point. I mean, all of this with branding, I mean, it just crosses over into every discipline. It really does.
And the 2 years they spend, we always tell them it's a resume every year every time they go to clinical. Like every time these students do a project, that's, like you say, put it on your resume. But every time they go to a clinical site, these people are watching them. And if they don't do the right thing, and if they don't behave, and if they don't get there on time, well, you're not getting hired in the end.
That's
And
right.
Don't ask us why, because it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. And if your Facebook page is stuff that shouldn't be on there. Like I said to them,
Exactly.
I'm on Facebook only because I got tired of everybody saying you're not on there. I said, but you look me up, you'll see my name, that word that I'm married. I live in New Jersey. I said, that's all you're going to see. And I have a privacy setting on. If anybody mentions me, it pops up. I said, I'm on LinkedIn. That's where I am. You know, that's the site. Because I said to them, you know, it's a different world now with the employers. That's where they're going. They're going to social media, Facebook, LinkedIn. You know, the resume is important, but all these other things have made it much more complicated than when we were going. It was just a resume. You know, that's why I say to them, even your business card, don't do a conventional business card. It doesn't have. I said to them, they had to do a business card project. I said, forget the shape of a business card. It could be any shape, any size, any material. Make it a texture. You're in the visual world. You know, when you hand it to somebody, you want it to remember. And same in your industry. You know, it could be across the board with anybody. You know, what separates everybody and makes it look a little different. You know.
And it does make a difference, especially if you give it that extra effort for that job you really want.
Yeah.
Like the one. You know, you've got to pull out all the stops, and in the visual arts world especially, you have to give it everything. They have to know that that speaks for you without you being there.
Exactly.
That they want to meet you after seeing your card or seeing your resume.
Or seeing your shopping bag.
Or seeing your shopping bag.
You know, well, they're not going to take a shopping bag, but I mean the same
No,
concept. You know, you look at it and you say, do I feel confident with that person? You know, it's like the spelling. I said to her, I probably wouldn't hire your team.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't hire you. I'd have to say no to the proposal. If you don't proof that, and that would have gone in the mail, and then on the other,
cost the employer thousands of dollars.
right, and the other side, they forgot the apostrophe in Mother's Day. I said, you know, that's the business world. You got to understand that. You know, so yeah, but yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.